Welcome to the Cheat Code Corner podcast, where we hit you with the cheat codes to help you advance in the areas that you care about. I'm your host, DC, and today we have a very, very special guest today. It is Dr. Joiselle Cunningham Smith. She is the CEO of Pathways to Creative Industries. She's also a social impact leader and a professor. Dr. Joiselle, what's good? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you so much for carving out some time. I want to express my deep gratitude for you joining, because you're busy. I was looking at, it looks like you've been doing a lot recently.
I have jobs.
Multiple jobs. Yes. No, I believe it. I believe it. So tell me, look, I recently read that Harvard Business Review article. I love that. It was with Dr. Angela Jackson. Dr. Angela Jackson. I was telling you, I ended up sending that to my HR because I thought it's so well written and so insightful. I work for a digital advertising startup, and as you could imagine, the numbers there, and from a diversity standpoint, not necessarily great. And I thought it was a very not just a timely article, but something that could kind of bring some knowledge to them as well. So I really love that article.
Thanks so much. I'm glad that you're putting it to good use, that it's helping your organization.
No, 100%. And one of the reasons why I wanted to you to hop on this, the podcast is just kind of like your space and what you're doing right now I think is so relevant to today. I mean, it's always been relevant, but I wanted you to come on and kind of share and talk a little bit about Pathway to Creative Industries and kind of what you're doing and kind of like your journey. Because I think right now folks need to hear kind of what you're doing. And I think it's also, this raises some really great questions about like kind of youth and hiring practices and what have you.
Okay. So with Pathways to Creative Industries, we work primarily with Fortune 100 companies that are looking to think differently about exposing young people to creative industries. And we define that by high wage, high growth careers that are less likely to be automated in the future. So graphic design, thinking about ways of technology intersecting with music or fashion or the design in some way. And we find that the young people we work with are really, really excited about those careers, but don't necessarily have the tools, the time, and really just the connections to understand how to land in those careers and to really thrive in those careers. So we help them to get that exposure, but we also work with the companies to think about how to change their HR practices, how to reimagine the way that they hire and support people, entry-level positions, young people, women, people of color. We have those conversations, but ultimately are reimagining their systems of working with people. And
So have you found, I'm just thinking about over the last few years, just in general, we've seen, especially with COVID and like George Floyd and all this social upheaval, I'd imagine like the needs and the demand for something like this must have been skyrocketing recently.
Yeah, I think it's yes and no. So demand means companies that really want to invest the time and resources to change behavior over time. And that's really, really difficult work.
Yes.
And it's not work necessarily that folks are always ready to sign up for. So it's easier maybe to set aside a budget for corporate social responsibility, which is more grant making towards other organizations. So saying, we're not going to actually change what we do, but we'll fund some organizations that are doing good work. Right.
It makes them feel good because it's like, hey, we're doing some work. We're not touching what's going on in here just yet.
Right. So, and sometimes that's easier. Sometimes that's where the organization is. But where we work with companies is really thinking about who knows that there's a systemic problem and how can we change the systems and reimagine them for something different. And that's just different work that not everyone wants to sign up for.
So I'm kind of curious then, Joyce, so like, how did you, I see that you've been in education for quite some time. I mean, I saw that like you worked at the Department of Education. I mean, you got your doctorate at Harvard and you went to Duke and Pace and everything was associated with education. You were living in, you know what I mean, in Sweden as well as Spain. So related to education. So how did you take that path and how did you end up kind of then creating your own, your own company and kind of diving into that? Because that's a very interesting journey to take.
Yeah. So I think that my skill set and just who I am as a person has always been thinking about different ways of thinking about an ecosystem rather than thinking in one lane. So an example of that is, even when I was in high school, I, was a dancer, really involved in dance, also really involved in other art forms, but also, was a triple jumper and also really loved my English and history classes and had a community there and really loved volunteering for the homeless. I wasn't someone who kind of defined themselves in kind of one area. And so I think as I got older, that became clear that my mission and what I wanted to do with my life was really around social impact. I want to provide the healing and uplift for myself and my own community and for those around me. Yep. So education was one way for me to do that. But also another way for me to do that is through some of my creative work. Another way for me to do that is by working with businesses, and I have the background to do that. Yeah. Another way for me to do that is by working with entertainers who are interested in expanding their humanitarian work. And so when I built a business, it was also trying to figure out a way of thinking about what my core mission is as just a human being on this planet, and what are the different tools that I have at my disposal because of the things that I've learned and where I've lived and the things I'm passionate about, and how do I design something that really helps to achieve those goals.
When you talk about one of the first things you mentioned was, hey, I didn't see just one lane. I had my foot dipped into multiple ones. Was that did you always have kind of that kind of like holistic view of things? Were you always able to take a step back and see like a full ecosystem? Because I have to be honest, like I really can't multitask very well. Like I can like listen, I could, you know what I mean? I could do so I'm always like kind of like hyper focused, pros and cons to that. But I've been trying to see the big picture of things, like as I take a step back. And I'm very curious to know, is that a skill set you developed? Did you always have that? Just very curious to know.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was more, if you had asked me as like a middle schooler, what do you want to be when you grow up? I probably would have said something like, I don't know, but I know I want to help people.
Okay.
And so even as a child who was trying to think about what I wanted to do, I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't necessarily know the lane. I didn't know if it was going to be in healthcare or education or in tech. But I knew kind of who I was and what I wanted to do. So I think the skill set came from knowing at my core what I wanted to do, and then being able to explore different ways of achieving that. And then figuring out what felt right and what felt centered in passion, centered in, my values and what didn't. So I don't know. It's more so kind of really testing out different ways of being and really trying to figure out different ways of showing my strengths.
So when you talked about testing out, tell me a little bit about that, about like how you tested things out. And the reason why I'm asking is because, I could just think about even when I was in college, or even when I got out of school immediately, like I felt as though I had to be pigeonholed, or like I didn't feel as though I was able to, I had that space to kind of test things out. I feel as though I kind of had to go somewhere immediately. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you tested out some of your different strengths and then kind of pointed that towards some of the different areas that you're kind of thriving in today.
Yeah. So I think that I was in education to be, so I was squarely in a certain discipline, a certain perspective, but I felt constrained by being in one discipline or one area.
Okay.
The reason I felt those constraints was I just didn't feel that education was enough to solve the problems that I saw in education. So I didn't see a school or a school system or just all of the things that we would associate with education being the core solution around what I saw young people and people of color facing in communities across the country.
Yep.
And that was solidified when I was in government and I got a chance to visit schools and nonprofits and teacher organizations and just lots of places around the country doing really, really good work on reservations in cities, in suburbs, in all different types of contexts. But I saw issues around infrastructure, technology, environment, healthcare, disengaged citizens. There were so many intertwined issues beyond what we would consider being a question around developing a great school with great curriculum and great teachers and things we know are really important. So I think part of it is I do know education really, really well, and I'm trained in that area. But I also, back to my core mission, was looking for ways of really helping myself, my community, and others. And that couldn't be done squarely in one area.
Yeah.
Couldn't be achieved that way.
Where do you think that comes from, that feeling of like wanting to lift people up? I mean, you said that you've kind of had that really early on. Because I got to be honest, like when I'm, like in high school, like I never felt like that. You know what I mean? Like I felt like I need to get my stuff squared straight. I got to get that, you know what I mean? Let me get and then once I get, then I can help other people. I mean, I try to live now by this kind of, this idea. I read it somewhere where they said, you should hang out with 3 groups of people, folks that are beyond you, that can inspire you, people around your level, and then you spend the other 1/3 of your time lifting people up. And I like that. But it sounds like you've been able to advance as well while also having this drive to want to help your community and help other people. And I'm curious if that's just been with you and the entire time, or did you kind of develop that over time?
Yeah, that's always been with me, to want to do that. To do it effectively has not always been part of my story, right? So there's parts, now I can say that it's super important for you, like being on an airplane, put on your own mask before assisting others, right? That you need to really just make sure that you're fully whole, that you are really just intimately involved with your own healing and the things that you want to achieve, and study that and revisit that and really know yourself well in order to be, or in order to hold space for others, right? So even just to be present for other people, not even just, build an entire organization that's working to support other people. So I think I've had to learn that over time, but kind of the core question around helping others, I think it just comes from what I was, born to be. I mean, I was born in Lenox Hill Hospital, which is on the east side of Manhattan, and it's where Blue Ivy was born. And I was premature, so I spent the first 30 days of my life at Lenox Hill.
Wow.
And I think it's funny because the next 30 days of my life was in the Bronx. And so my life has kind of always introduced me to glaring disparity. And I could talk about other things between just going across the George Washington Bridge as a child to in the morning being in a middle-class community where I saw folks thriving in a lot of different ways. And then in the afternoon, being in one of the poorest zip codes in the nation in the Bronx and seeing a completely different picture.
Yeah.
And so I think part of it is just, I was born to see disparity.
Yeah.
And to see myself in that disparity and to not be overtaken by it, to not feel condemned by it or like it can't be solved.
Yeah. Do you find, and you talked a little bit about, I mean, kind of that journey, do you find that seeing some of the being in environments that way where there are a lot of people that are disadvantaged, but then also having the benefits of being in a middle-class environment too, like, do you feel as though those things had enabled you to kind of like go through some of the other circles that you were in, whether at Duke or Pace or Harvard?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've been, I worked in the Obama administration and lived in Spain and Sweden. And, those were totally different environments. And then I also taught in the South Bronx and in West Harlem. And I also, I'm always in different contexts in my professional and personal life. But again, it doesn't feel foreign for me. It doesn't feel stretched in any way because it's been a part of my story my entire life.
Yeah. So how does someone then, and, as an entrepreneur, I mean, you started your own business and I guess there's people that are probably wondering, and even myself are wondering, because I do consulting on the side, but I have my primary corporate gig. I mean, how did you start to put the building blocks into place of a business? I mean, what did you see that, you know what I mean? Did you see did it start with a problem and then you said, hey, I want to fix this problem and now I'm going to figure out who can help me, build this business? Or how did you go about approaching that? Because I actually have no idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of different things. So, when I was finishing my doctorate, had a lot of supports to kind of rethink how I wanted to approach my career following graduation day.
Yeah.
And I got to use some of the things that I was doing in school to kind of reimagine that process and actually think critically about it using, frameworks and fancy articles and to talk to different professors at Harvard to just think about how I was going to approach this. So I had that. I also had support because I work for CareerWiseNY, which is an apprenticeship model out of New York City that works with companies across New York City on apprenticeship. And so I also had the support of my employer, who also had like-minded goals, and to also pursue funding opportunities and just other types of collaborative strategic partnerships.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that, I think there's so many entrepreneurship books out there, but then when I talk to entrepreneurs, it's all different and it's all different. And folks, I know a lot of people who are successful and their blueprint was kind of all over the place.
Different. Yeah. Well, so the reason why I asked that, so I've spoken with a couple of different my friends that have started businesses, not just like. And what's interesting, there is one thing that's somewhat there's a little bit of connective tissue between all the stories. Number one, they all like to read and stuff like that. But there's another thing that's really important, which is that whatever business that they ended up kind of like putting the building blocks for and starting, they had some familiarity with it, whether they were doing it on their own or for another company, or whatever it was, there was this expertise within that then gave him the confidence and the relationships and the springboard to do that. And I thought that was coming from a worker bee, like, you know what I mean? I never knew that's how it actually, for a lot of people, that it actually started like that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. And I think it's also because you're living whatever the problem is, you're also seeing where the problem is not being solved, where there's opportunity to solve it, what it would take to actually solve it well.
Yeah.
Would be interested in designing it with you or purchasing or whatever the model is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What would you say? I mean, as a young woman of color, like, obviously you have the stats to get things going, but sometimes just having credentials and stats, you still have to do the work. What was like, some of the key challenges that came up that you didn't expect or that you had to overcome to really get this into place?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of challenges, but I think that one of the pieces is, whenever you're pitching to folks, or it could be pitching for funding, it just could be sharing the idea with other people, it could be sharing your early wins, or, once you've gotten started, it's just running the day-to-day business. There are always, I think, going to be, critics, naysayers, or folks who really don't believe in the idea or just confused about the approach in some way.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that happens. I mean, I know the Spanx founder talks a lot about, Sarah Blakely talks a lot about that when she founded Spanx, that there was just always like a lot of confusion around the model or the idea, or just critics. And even when she had established her brand, and was doing pretty well. And I think that part of it is just really solidifying your why you are doing the work that you're doing, why you're going to push forward if you didn't get the funding opportunity that you needed to move along your path. Is why you're in it strong enough to move you past some of those moments. And I think for me, I think it was a challenge, but an opportunity was to figure out, like, what do I need to tap into on a daily or a weekly basis that helps me to return to center, so that if I get knocked down, it's not for long. What do I need to return to that I can get back up and get back up quickly?
Yeah, it's really funny you should say that, because, Eric Thomas, I listen to these motivational speakers nowadays, Eric Thomas and Tim Robbins, and it's fun, Tony Robbins. And it's funny because my mom tried to make me listen to that stuff when I was younger, and it never resonated. And then once you get older, you're like, oh yeah, these guys, they know what they're talking about, right? And it's funny you should talk about the why, because like my why has evolved over time. At first my why was, I'm trying to get out of this debt. You know what I mean? I'm trying to pay this debt, right? I need to make some cash. And then it was, it switched over to now I want to feel challenged and fulfilled in this job, whatever the case may be. And I think having that why, like you mentioned before, and making sure that it's strong and being able to have that to lean onto, I think that's 100% a cheat code that a lot of people don't take the time to understand, write down and understand what their why is. I think it is so powerful. And I love what you said, which was, listen, I need something that I can tap into that's going to bring me back to center when I don't get that funding. When I'm trying, you know what I mean? When the delays are going on and I set the deadline for Tuesday and now it's Friday and I'm feeling tight. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
What else? I mean, what else? What are some of the other things that maybe you've...
And more so, I'll just add to that, Damien, that it's the why is also, it's not just like, I'm in this because, like, it's my dream to do X, Y, and Z. It's like something that is deep in your heart that is going to, like, move you to tears, move you to be able to fight, move you to be able to push. And, it's different things for different people. But I think the why also has to be kind of like bringing you back to a very deep, emotional, reflective point that is stronger than any challenge that you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, sometimes it's me thinking about my actual why, but with that, it's looking at a photo of my grandmother or other ancestors. Because for me, like looking into their eyes for people who are no longer here, it's something that is very, very powerful for me, very encouraging, and also reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Wow, I like that. I never even thought of that one. Right? You know what I mean? Go back into the old, to the old photo album. Look at grandma and grandpa. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's heavy. I was speaking to a friend of mine, and we were also kind of talking about like different ways that we coping mechanisms and things when you use to get over challenges and things. And I was curious too. I mean, are there what are some of the other things that maybe you've looked to after like experiencing some challenges that you think have helped you? I mean, do you watch TV? Do you talk to, close friends? Are there fun things that you do as well? Do you, go out for a run or do yoga and things? Because I think self-care and stuff is so important. And I think that's something that sometimes folks forget in the midst of like, the craziness that's happening.
Absolutely. So I try to make sure that I'm fueling my creative side as much as I can. And it's been a little bit challenging during COVID because some of the things I like to do involve large communities of people. So, but, pre-pandemic, I really love salsa. And part of why I like it, besides, I think, just the opportunity to dance and to learn in community with other people, is salsa is very meditative because you really can't do it if you're not paying attention. You really can't like think about anything else. Because in the case of someone who's following a male partner, the person is giving you really subtle signals while you're dancing about what you were supposed to do and what you're going to do next.
Wow. Okay. So really, that's going on? All that's going on during salsa?
All that's going on during salsa. So like, you're not getting a warning about, you're not getting more than a half of a second to prepare for turning 2 or 3 times, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So you've got to be prepared if that's going to be the next step. So for me, it's much more meditative than going to a yoga class. But I do that. I do meditate. I do meditate. I do enjoy walks or hiking in nature or just connecting in nature. I did not like to do that earlier in my life. So part of that like evolving and growing is like what works now that didn't work before, or process of self-care. And I think, I also enjoy painting, poetry, any way that I can just have slices of creative expression. And, moments that I can just, think of something from a blank slate is the way that I think of it. And I think my work is similar to that, where it's like I'm reimagining something new that no one has ever seen before. And that's kind of how I think about, if I'm going to dance or write a poem or have a blank canvas. It's just like, how do you bring something to life that's never been seen?
So kind of pivoting to that, like, I mean, how did you bring to life now, pathways to creative industries? I know you mentioned, that with CareerWise, there was part of that too.
Yeah.
They kind of give you a springboard to that, but I mean, how did you end up bringing it to life then? I mean, and kind of like getting that to kind of thrive? Because it's been going on, it's about almost 2 years now, right? Is it?
Yeah. So I incubated it so Harvard has an incubation lab out of Harvard Business School. And they have, so you apply, and through that, there's a lot of different mentorship and just access to advisors.
Yeah.
I had a really great advisor who she had built a few fashion companies, and she had also she was just an entrepreneur. She had also invested in a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
So tangibly, I had this resource, this university behind me, this incubation team that was also supporting me. And then I also had tangibly just, again, my employer and access to funders and folks who were around me. I think that, but some of it was just like me going to Google and Googling what I was looking for, going to LinkedIn and thinking, well, I really need to connect with someone with these skills, and just getting on LinkedIn and contacting people.
Wow.
Some of it was just reaching out or talking to my community and saying, I'm really in need of learning more about this part of building a business. Do you know anyone that I can speak to that can help? Or
So it sounds like you tapped into, like you said, kind of tapped into the resources that you had available. Of course, you had school and you had the incubation and the work, but also just your community in general. It sounds like this, like, it's funny. A friend of mine that I was speaking with, his name is Ignacio. He recently started a real estate investment fund, and I was asking him about it. And number one, he talked about how he had been working for a real estate company before and kind of springboard into it. But the other thing that he said was, he's like, when you're starting like kind of a real estate fund and things, he's like, I kind of started just with my friends and family, really. You just start with people that are in your kind of immediate circle, whether you're asking for dollars or asking for information or what have you. And I think a lot of people, especially when you're younger, the 25-year-old Joiselle, you know what I mean? Would you know to do that? I did not know, like, to kind of start with that. I didn't know how big, because you don't feel like you have a big network when you start out, but you'll be surprised at how many aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, people you went to school with have a wealth of knowledge that you can kind of tap into.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the friends and family model is flawed and problematic because it depends a little bit on class and on who your friends and family are.
Yeah, true.
Which leads to, I think, greater disparity. So I do have colleagues or friends who, because of their class background, going to friends and family really meant, thousands or millions of dollars of investment into their idea. Right. Which is not necessarily what I had. Now, I had, I definitely had friends and family who supported me. I had friends and family who were willing to, and in the ways that they could support.
Yeah.
But I relied more heavily on my network that I had built in my career. And then this aspirational network, which was just, I don't know these people, but they're one phone call or one email away or a LinkedIn connection away. Yeah. And how do I build those connections if they are the folks that I need to be successful?
Yeah. Who else took that approach? Kobe Bryant, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, Kobe Bryant, of course, obviously his dad was in the NBA. So he grew up with some cash anyway. But he jumped from high school to the NBA. And so he didn't go to university to have a good training, to know the fundamentals in that way. So he would just, whether it was Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, he would call, email, and ask those folks, well, at the time, call primarily, just to kind of ask for help and to better understand. And then when he retired and he wanted to get into, storytelling and things, he would just literally call and try to establish these relationships and get information from people. Now, of course, Kobe Bryant emails you. His success rate is going to be a little bit higher than ours. But I think it does speak to the fact that is something that's actionable, that can be helpful and very impactful. And if you just try to, tap into that as aspirational network or whatnot, I think that is helpful.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't know that, yes, you will get a lot of no's, but yes, you will also get some yeses in there as well.
Yeah.
I think folks assume that folks won't respond back,
Yep.
or that they're bothering the people that they're reaching out to.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that if you used their time well, and you are really efficient with time, you not only ask for help, but you offer help as well. And you really become clear about what the needs of the other person are, and you contribute to the problems they're wrestling with, that people do want to engage and that they're happy to connect with you over email or over the phone.
Yeah. No,
a while. Yeah.
No, I think real talk, actually, I do think that is actually a real cheat code that people can leverage. No, seriously, it is. It's something no one tells you that. No one has told. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, and I truly believe that you can do that. And I've heard a few people mention that, who are successful, that they've reached out to people and that they didn't know, and that they will get no's, but they will get a lot of yeses, and that's how you can kind of advance. So I love that. I really, Joiselle, I really love that one. I'm seeing that we're kind of wrapping up on time, and so I want to make sure we have about another 5 to 10 minutes. So I want to cover a couple of things as it relates to any more cheat codes, and I want to go into the power questions. Perfect. So I was curious then, I mean, cheat codes, some people often ask me, what are cheat codes and how are they different than like a knowledge tip? And the reality is, a cheat code, the fundamental essence of a cheat code is that it's actionable, and that oftentimes it's something most people haven't heard about unless you've kind of done it. So it's something that's going to enable you to advance quickly to get to kind of where you want to be. And it's just something that's usually insightful, that's actionable. Mm-hmm. So I was just curious, I mean, outside of some of the things we mentioned, are there any other kind of cheat codes that you'd want to share with the audience about how you got to where you're at?
Yeah. So I was reflecting on the importance of really thinking about preserving who you are in terms of your values, and thinking about integrity. Mm-hmm. And integrity from a place of who are you and what are your values, and how do you work on achieving what you want to achieve in the world, while thinking about how to maintain those values along the way.
Yeah.
And so I thought of this in negotiation terms, where when you enter a negotiation, you think of your BATNA or your best alternative to the negotiated agreement. Mm-hmm. And you go in thinking, if this doesn't work out, like, what is the best alternative that I have available to me?
Yep.
And psychologically, it helps you to go into the conversation from a neutral place. You're not like going in begging and like just lowering your standards over time, but you're going in thinking, this is the lowest I can go.
Yeah.
To still be in integrity. And beyond that, it's just not going to work. And I'm going to just go to an alternative. And I think that it's really important when you're working for an organization, particularly one that you haven't founded, or that, you're not a founder of, or you are not part of the executive leadership team, to think about what you need to maintain before you go to an alternative. And what is kind of the floor that you need to be reflecting on. Because if you're not intentionally reflecting on it, you run the risk of, not through anything intentional, but just through being part of an organism, which, being part of a large company or any company is, you're in an organism.
Yes. Yeah.
You're moving along with the other organisms, and there's a flow, there's a culture, and you can get swept up. So you've got to think about, okay, what are the things that I have to maintain? And if it dips below this, can I still achieve my mission in the world? So an example is, you could be someone whose core mission in life is to help develop products and new things that people have never seen before. And you've chosen to do that through technology. And you join a company that has a very visionary CEO and leadership team that is really empowering you to bring these new ideas to life. But it could also be that after a couple of years, the leadership team changes or your boss changes. Right. It could be in a couple of years that the resources change at the company and the vision changes. If you are not tracking how is my mission being affected by the changes within the organization, you could end up in a role that has nothing to do with bringing the visionary ideas to life. You could end up in a role that's just fitting the needs of the company that has evolved over time. And you've drifted away from your core mission and what you're good at, your strengths, why you were put on the planet. So I just think, something that I wish I had known is just what should I be in reflection on why I'm here, and what I'm trying to achieve, and then what is an alternative if for some reason there's changes, there's slow, or I grow and evolve as well. Yeah. And there's a missing element. I just think that there's no opportunity, no matter the prestige, the level of compensation, there's no opportunity that is worth compromising who you are and what your purpose is. And so just really making sure that you are really intimate with what that is and how it's playing out week by week is something that I think is critical that folks should be aware of. And connected to that is, I think those alternatives come from your community. They come from your mentors, they come from your sponsors, they come from your colleagues who you are connecting with and you are really treating with care. And so really thinking about who is in your network, who are the people who are in your industry and outside of your industry, who are the people older than me and younger than me, the people who know more than me in some areas and less than me in others, and how am I engaging with them over time? Because we all have opportunities that we know about that other people don't know about, and vice versa. And we just want to just be in community with other people so that we're learning and growing along the way, but also so that we can maintain, again, the purpose that we have in our roles and operate from purpose and not from distraction.
I love that. Operate from purpose and not distraction. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to steal that. I'm taking it. I'm taking it. It's so that's, I love that point because having the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, having a baseline, establishing that and evaluating where you're at over time through this period. I never even thought of that, but it's so critical because what ends up happening is when you don't do that, companies change, things change, and then you're just feeling you're feeling like you're feeling out of place. You feel like things don't fit. You know why things don't fit? Because you haven't been checking in. You know what I mean? You have not been checking in. And if you don't do that, you can find yourself in wrong fitting roles, unhappy, which can stunt lots of things, whether it's your progress or anything else. So that is 100% a cheat code. And I love it too. It's because it's actionable and it's something that we can all do. And it's so personal too. So that's super insightful, Joyce. I love that one.
Thanks. And also know that those things can change over time too. So we can't remain fixed in because we learn and grow all the time. So we can't remain fixed in what are the layers of our purpose, what the layers are, or just also the complexity of the company that we're in or the environment that we're in. There's just so much that goes into it, but it's just really like sitting down with yourself and diagnosing what is going on, what is happening, how has the pandemic affected my role, how does it affect what I'm trying to achieve, not just with this role, but with my life. When I, write my memoirs, decades from now, and I want to look back, what am I trying to achieve with my life? And so is this something that is going to be additive, or is this something that I'm now outgrowing for whatever reason?
You realize too, Joiselle, that cheat code that is in line with how you think holistically about things. You know what I mean? Like that is so in line with like how, and for someone like me, I'll just be very like, that's something that I need. I need to know, I need to understand and take a step back and see, hey, how does this role fit? Or is what I'm doing right now fitting with my overall story and not just today, which I think is really powerful. Perfect. Well, listen, I know we're wrapping up on time. I want to run through this one last thing. It's called Power Questions. It's 5 quick questions designed to just kind of better understand who you are and kind of what makes you tick. All right. You ready for them?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. How many hours of sleep do you get?
I regularly get 8 hours a night.
Beautiful. What's your diet like?
I'm mostly gluten and dairy free, but I would say, try to eat healthy, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of lean protein.
Lean protein. All right. Favorite activity to unwind?
Favorite meditation.
Meditation. Love that. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Link myself to any part of the world.
Link yourself to any part of the world.
Link.
Yeah, like transportation. Yeah, teleportation. Gotcha.
Okay, teleportation.
Yep. What are you reading or listening to?
So right now I've been listening to a podcast by Lori Shemek, who is just a health coach who interviews a lot of different folks around their health goals and their perspectives on different ways of eating and exercising. And I've just learned a lot about how the human body works and the human brain and just different ideas about health. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I might have to check that out. Like, I'm all about that self-care and just leading a healthy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, Joiselle, thank you so much for stopping by. If people want to contact you, whether it's for business opportunities, what have you, I mean, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media at Joiselle Smith, so at Joiselle Smith, and that's on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, just across social media platforms. And then I'm also, I have a website where you can also connect with me. If you go to joiselle.com, there's a connect button where you can just send me an email if you'd like to get in touch.
Very cool. Very cool. You're leading by example, like you said, you know what I mean? Just being available. Love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Cool. Thank you.